Hello traders, Thomas B here with a little video to show you what is new in the March-April 2023 release of my supply-demand software for TradeStation. Before I get to that, there is the obligatory risk disclosure and legalese, as I call it. Since we're talking about trading, since we're talking about people's money, I have to tell you that I am not a financial advisor. I'm not a licensed or registered wealth manager, fund manager, investment advisor, or anything like that. In fact, I'm not licensed or registered anything. I am just a guy who's been trading supply and demand and using the supply and demand technique in my own trading for the last 14 years. And I've been helping quite a few other people use it during the course of that time. And the last 5 years, I've been using software that I developed myself to help find supply and demand setups that are tradable. And I've been sharing that with other people during this time. I'm not charged a dime for it so far, but I may do so someday. And that software is what we're talking about today. So anything you hear in here that you might take as a potential trade or see as a potential trade is completely, that's fine. You can do that. But I am not responsible for any decisions you take regarding your trading. You are responsible for your own trades, and certainly will I not be responsible for any losses that you take in your trading, just as I will not be responsible for any profits you make in your trading. That's all on you. All right, let's then move on to what we hear about. Show it. I'll open TradeStation. Actually, I had it open already. This is TradeStation 10 we have here. This software works at TradeStation 10 and TradeStation 9.5 equally well. And this is from this morning. This is the workspace we used for day trading. And we didn't have too much going on this morning. Today is the Fed day, March 22nd. And as most of you know, these days are generally not the best days to make any major trades. Often the markets are quiet in the morning, or even, let me put it this way, the market dynamics that are normally in effect are usually different on these Fed days. So today, if you didn't trade today, would not be a bad day to sit on your hands and do something else. But if you did trade, there were a couple of setups. And right now here, we're looking at the Russell, which had a decent bounce off a 10-minute demand zone down here. You can see the zone if we scroll back here. See the demand zone here, a rally-based rally zone. That worked quite well for, I'm guessing, about a $700-800 move per contract in the Russell here. And also, this was right after the open that happened, you see here. And also at the 10:30 reversal, it came into a fairly nice supply zone up here. On the 50-minute chart, this was on the 10-minute chart, but on the 50-minute chart, it came into that and reversed down from that. So the Russell bouncing between 10-minute demand and 15-minute supply. That 50-minute supply is also visible on the 20-minute. That's what happened in the Russell there. The other one I noticed this morning was in copper, where, let's see if we can find it. Yes, indeed, we had in copper, we had another 15-minute demand zone. That copper came into that just after the open. Price hammered down into this demand zone, bounced out of there for, I'm guessing, an $800-900 move per contract at this point. And that's pretty much all I noticed for this morning as far as day trades go in the futures market. All right, so I want to show you what's going on with the indicator itself. All right. With that out of the way, let's get on to talking about what's new with the software itself. I should add that this is the 49th external public version of this software over the last 5 years since I started developing it. Of course, internally, there's been hundreds of development releases I used, and every time I develop a new one, of course, I use it in my own trading when I find trades. But to external users, there's been 49 different ones since I first began releasing this to users in January of 2019. And so to show this, I'm going to start with a new chart and say, let's just go back to Russell. And then let's close this workspace here. I'm trying to use some menus instead of my hotkeys so I don't confuse people who view these videos. And we'll open another chart analysis window. And hopefully it'll come up with a Russell chart, and it did. In this case, we're just going to change it to a 15-minute, which is where we left off. And as always, you add this indicator. If you have a toolbar icon, you can use that, the add study there, or you can right-click the background on your chart and go to studies, say add study. And you'll get a list of different indicators here. They also show me these paint bars and other kinds of studies, but this is an indicator. And if we scroll to the top, you will see have a couple of different ones that are development tools And then I have $SD zones and $SD zones HTF, high time frame. And the dollar sign is just to keep them on top of the list, so I don't have to scroll all the way down to find them. The one you always want to use, SD zones, the one called HTF, is only used when you apply multiple time frames on the same chart and you want to show high time frame zones overlaid on the main entry chart. So just for regular, use entry zones, and also for high time frame zones in high time frame charts, you just always use the regular SD zones. So that's the one we're going to add. If you click prompt for editing, it will come up right away and show you the inputs and other settings for this indicator under customize indicator. So there's a whole panel here with the general features, but most importantly, the inputs that are used to control all the features of the indicator. This is how all software works in TradeStation, all easy language software, all indicators and other software written by users in TradeStation, that you have all these different inputs. Some software have very few. This one has many because there's a ton of features. And this is where you control the criteria for how you want to search for zones. There are a couple of other things, such as whether you want to ignore zones overnight. Also, when it gets to radar screen, if you want to get an alert when we are close to a zone, there is visual settings. Do you want to show this? Do you want to show that? Do you want to show labels and titles and so forth? There are custom colors if you want to use those. So a whole bunch of different things. And down towards the bottom, there's some more sophisticated settings that few people will have to use. But still, all of these features are there that have been added over the years, and they're controllable with all of these different inputs. Now, this is how it works in TradeStation, that to control a piece of software you write, you have these inputs, and you can put a value in there. In the case of TradeStation 9.5, you'll see there's a little text here that shows a description of what it does, each input. In the case of TradeStation 10, there's called a tooltip. When you hover the cursor over the name of each input, it'll tell you what it means. And of course, the most important input in this one has always been, and still is, one called settings preset that controls the zone criteria, which default is 0, which is the one you use for chart confluence. But there are other ones I'll show real briefly that you'll use when you scan for entry zones. So let's just use the defaults and add them there. And we'll get a chart similar to what we saw before, the 15-minute chart of the Russell. You'll see that we came down to this zone that we actually up to this zone we saw before. As it turns out, that 10-minute zone that we saw that bounce from this morning is also visible here, because these settings we use are a little more lax than the ones we showed in the screen before. So this zone down here also worked as a 15-minute zone. So in this case, we came down to that 15-minute zone, up to this 15-minute zone, back down to that 15-minute zone, and so far it's working as well. Yesterday, it looks like we had another supply zone up here that worked pretty great. And this zone over here, we scroll back to it by control clicking one of the lines, so that will scroll you back to the zone. And a base drop zone there, and that kind of helped price below that zone all this time. All these many times, and finally we came up there. When you see that the zone has a dotted, I call inside line. This is the inside line. This is the outside line where it has a dotted inside line. That means it's been touched. Price has been back there, or at least very close to it. When it also has a dashed dot outside line, that means it's been used so much. We've been so deep into the zone that it's time to stop using and at least stop trusting it as an entry zone. It's still on the chart, but because you should still respect it for your trading. And if you're in a long trade, you certainly want to take some profits when you get up to it. But for entries, you should start giving it less credence and or skipping it altogether. And that's how that works. We'll see this one zone here is still valid. It still has a solid outside line, even though it was touched. The dotted inside line shows that it was touched here. We came into that zone and worked from there. The same with the one down here. If we come much deeper into this, or if we get several touches into it, eventually this one will also get a dash dot outside line, which means essentially, as we call it, the zone has been invalidated. We call it invalidated here, which means it is no longer valid as an entry zone, but it's still shown on the chart. Now, and there are other ones down here. This one also been invalidated now, and not the best zone in the world. One down here, still fresh, not been used. And of course, there's one major one down here that was a drop based rally. Actually, there's a combination of two zones, this zone here and this zone there, that ended up working working great this time here. So that's all the stuff that's exactly the same that's been for years, and you should probably be familiar with that already. Now, one thing I do want to point out is if you do not want to see these invalidated zones, you've always had the possibility, not always, but last couple of years, you've had the possibility if you go and change the inputs, and you can do that a couple of different ways. I'm showing the easy way. If you just double click one of the lines, TradeStation will ask, say, this drawing object was added by a study. Do you want to customize a study? And what I answer yes, that will take you straight to this customized indicator panel. That's the easier route to get there instead of right-clicking and saying, customize analysis techniques, all of that. So if we go here, there is an input called show invalidated zones, which is true. If you select false for that one and click OK, it'll stop showing these. It'll only show the ones that are still in place, so to speak. It won't show the invalidated ones. But of course, the downside is now you have to use your eyes to, as you always should, but have to use your eyes to make sure that you know what's going on. If we're coming into some maybe old zones that are still there, that's something you want to take into account when you're in a trade. So that's why we normally keep them on the chart, and that's why that is the default. All right, that's all basic stuff. That's all how that works. Now let me move on a little bit and show you how things can be done a little differently in the new version. Now, in this version, and actually even in the last version, although a lot of people didn't realize it yet, we actually have a user interface that will make it easier to make some of these changes. So if you click anywhere in the chart with your right mouse button and hold down the control key, so control right click, that will bring up a settings panel, as I call it. That helps control the different features, not all of the features, but many of the features that are available in the indicator that are available through the inputs are also available through this settings panel here. Again, this was also actually there in the January, February version of the indicator, but probably not a lot of people used it or found out about it. It's been expanded dramatically. A little overhaul of the layout of this is also loading a lot faster in this new version, and there are some very significantly expanded features as part of this panel. Now, it's broken down into zone detection, so all of the features you see here are related to the criteria we use to detect zones. There is the settings preset, which controls how strict we are in looking for zones. And the default, as always, is when you just put an indicator on a chart, it uses what I call the chart confluence mode. It also displays that up here in the chart title. And this chart confluence mode is really not kind of solid enough or not strict enough to look for entry zones in a pure supply and demand trading environment. But if you use a number of other trade signals, a number of other indicators or signals in your trading, it is great for just finding decent zones that can help select a trade in confluence with these other indicators, these other signals. So that's why that is the default setting. We just put it on a chart. You will get this chart confluence mode, which we call 0 here, and that's what you should often use for that. If you are a pure supply demand trader that are looking for pure supply and demand setups, then you want to go a little stricter. And we have 3 different modes for that, for entry zones as pure supply and demand, which is medium, strict, and extreme. And extreme is just a name I used some time ago. It's not that extreme. It's just that it's stricter than strict, and it's stricter than medium. Simple as that. These have numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally, there's a custom one, which if you select that one, you'll have the option of going into the inputs and select program, essentially a bunch of parameters for how the indicator works to find zones. And very, very few people other than myself ever do that. As a matter of fact, I don't even do it much myself anymore. I used to do it quite a bit back in the early versions of the indicator. There's also the one called high time frame, which is the one you use to find high time frame zones, that is on charts that are 5 to 10 times higher interval than your entry chart. And once you use that, we can switch that on. If we select this one, click reload down here, it'll switch to that high time frame mode, and we can change this chart to a 60-minute chart. That will be a way to show it. Now, the high time frame zones are not nearly good enough for entry zones. Okay, so it'll find a lot of zones, and they're not ones you want to risk your money on for entry zones. They're only there for one purpose, namely to help guide you in chosen direction. So when price is moving from a high time frame supply to a high time frame demand, that is where on your entry chart, your 15-minute entry chart, you want to look for supply zones. Vice versa, when price is moving from demand zones to supply zones on your high time frame chart using these lax high time frame zones, well, that is when you want to look for demand zones on your entry chart. You'll find that in this lax mode, often there'll be so many zones that it combines them, as it's doing here. We had a rally-based drop, supply zone over here, not that bad. Price came back up into it and of course reacted to it. Then in the course of that, it formed a new supply zone, which got what I call merged with the other one. So this and this are two zones that are merged up. And sometimes you'll see several that are merged with each other. So the total outside is this, the total inside is this. How do you use that information? Well, just basically to know that from the moment you get up here all the way up to there, you can expect there to be some supply on this high time frame chart, at least enough that you probably shouldn't be looking at buying demand zones on your entry chart until this thing has been busted. You should rather wait for price to start coming lower and then look for pullbacks into supply zones on your entry chart. That will be your higher probability trade in that case. And actually, this is where most supply demand traders I met get it wrong, because they keep banging their heads against the walls. They keep buying demand zones when they should be shorting supply zones, and vice versa, because they never kind of they don't look at direction the right way. They keep looking for strong reversals instead of just following what's going on with price on these higher time frame charts. Anyway, this is just this is not a trading lesson. This video is just to show you how that works. And again, you saw how quickly and easily it is to change between the different modes. Let me go back. I'll click Control, right click again. I'll open this panel again. As you saw, I checked the high time frame zones here for that, and you also notice probably well, two things: that it changes the chart title to say high time frame zone, so you know always which mode or which preset you're in. Also, the colors of the lines change to magenta, which is the color I've used for high time frame zones, whereas cyan is the color I'm using for entry zones. Now, you can change to any other preset you want, of course, if you want to experiment with that. But one thing you can always do is if you click the little input button here, that will revert that setting to what is the default, or rather what is the input you have set for this. So the inputs you have set now becomes your default, so to speak. So if I click this and click reload, we'll be back to the chart confluence, the medium lax. Again, if I click this, double click this, go into the inputs, you may recall 0 is which is the chart confluence medium lax. That is now the input. Okay, so that is now my baseline, so to speak. So whenever I've messed around with these settings, let's say I say I do want a strict, but I want to see both drop-based rally and rally-based drop, as well as drop-based drop and rally-based rally zones. I know those want to show all zones, which is not default in the strict environment. If I want to say this whole business with merging of zones that you saw in the high time frame mode before, we want to turn that off. And also, I really don't want any zones between the market close at 4:15 and until the pre-market opens at 8 o'clock. Well, I can do all that, and if I click reload, that will be applied, and that's actually, there will be not a single zone in this environment here, unless we get up to let's see, 1963. Again, I can control left click, and we'll go back. I'll see there's one rally-based drop all the way up there. That's the only zone we see in this stricter mode. That shows you an idea of how much stricter that one is. Now, if I go back to the panel and say, hey, hang on, let me just go back to default. I can click or get back to the input. I can click the input button for each of these, or I can just say reset all settings to input values. I'll just go back to the default, which is the chart confluence mode, and that will all be shown in for all of them. All right. Okay. So much for that. I hope that makes sense. Oh, I should probably have changed back to the 15-minute chart before, in case you're wondering where all the zones we saw before. So this is what the original 15-minute chart looked like. We were on the 60-minute chart because we're looking for high time frame zones before. All right, with that out of the way, let me take this one step further. The feature you saw before of showing invalidated zones on the chart is a one that we changed in the input. I mean, if you remember that, which means when you go to the visual settings, which is where we show or change different visual settings for the chart. You know, do we want to see the chart title? We can turn that off. Do we want to see labels for the prices? Some people don't want that. You can turn that off as well. If you want to see invalidated zones again, even though you changed the input, well, you can turn that on. You can do that. If you reload with that, well, you will see invalidated zones. You won't have this title up here that shows what settings preset, what mode we're in, and you won't have any labels on your price lines. That's how you change that. So it's just a click away to change these things, and actually makes it a lot more convenient to adjust things than going into the inputs and change it in there. And that's kind of the first thing that I want to accomplish with that. Interestingly, this was all available. What we looked at so far was all available in the January-February release. We have yet to come with the stuff that's actually new in this March-April release here. Let's just reset everything back to the input values. As a matter of fact, let me just delete this one and start over. Again, I hope so far this makes sense. Now, the next thing I want to show you is this. Let's say just restore this chart to its normal size. Now let's say I add the indicator. I add SD zones to it again, like this. And we'll just go with all default settings. That's fine. And let's say in this case, I have different charts with different intervals, different time frames. I could copy this window. I could paste it. And guess what? I could paste 4 of them. There we go. And I can ask TradeStation to arrange them all, so I'll get them lined up like this. And let's say this one is a 15-minute chart. This one is a 20-minute chart. If you'll excuse me, I have these on hotkeys. That makes it a little easier to select that. So I've set these up to be 15, 20, 30, and 60 minutes, which is a completely reasonable layout to use for looking for swing trades. And what we're looking at trades are different time frames here. See if there's not a zone on a 50-minute, if there's a zone on a 20, is there a zone on a 30, or is there a zone on a 60? That's generally often how you look for supply-demand zones. If you only look on one interval, on one time frame, you are never going to find enough zones probably to make your time worthwhile. So, and with this, obviously now we're seeing 2-minute zones because there's too much going on. This is where we start getting a little more strict, saying, let's just tone this down a little bit. I do not want to spend time evaluating each of all these zones here. What I want to do is this. I want to go to a stricter mode. Let's just choose strict, which is a good, happy place a starting place to go for your when looking for potential entry trades, entry zones. And the one thing you'll notice is there's a couple of checkboxes down here that are set by default. It says apply to all charts, apply to all radar screen rows, but in this workspace only. So right now, by default, when I say reload, it will apply this to all 4 of them. So it'll copy that information, that setting we just selected, namely being, in the strict preset. That now gets applied to all 4 of them. You see entry zone strict, entry zone strict, entry zone strict, entry zone strict. So all 4 of them are now going to the stricter mode to look for zones. They also all 4 looking at invalidated zones. So you'll see this one here, the 15, the good old friend, the 15-minute zone from this morning. That is invalidated because we were in there a couple of times. Well, in strict mode, that's enough. Those couple of times is enough that it says don't trust it again. If you're in a more lax mode, it'll be more tolerant of it. But in strict mode, it doesn't take a whole lot of touches. The same thing for this 20-minute zone we have down there. Just one candle, rally base rally. And since we were down there twice, this strict mode says that's enough. Let's not trust that one for another trade. 2 is enough. All right. Now, if you don't want to see these invalidated zones, once again, what you can do is right-click, and you get up the settings panel, and you go and say, I don't want invalidated zones. I know we disabled it before, but that was in a whole other chart, and delete that and remove that indicator in the meantime. Now we start it over. If I click this, that'll be applied to all 4 of them. And none of them will show that. This is one way we can start looking for potential candidate trades on 4 different time frames at once: the 15, the 20, the 30, and the 60. Now we'll see there's the 50-minute zone down here. Rally is rally. There's a little bit of a odd situation with some lows right down there, so I might not be interested in that. But there's a couple of other ones we can look at. Now, obviously, now we're getting into how trade finding with supply and demand works. And as you who are familiar with my software already knows, this is where radar screen really becomes the tool of choice, being so powerful because it can scan across a number of different symbols at the same time. And what time do we have now? It's about 1 o'clock. There's still a couple of hours, at least an hour and a half until we get the Fed announcement. So this is not a bad time to look for swing trades, although I wouldn't want to put on any trades, wouldn't want to enter any trades at this time. So let me just close this workspace because I've shown you how that worked. So we'll close this workspace here. And we'll open one of the SD radar workspaces, which are the workspaces that come with my software that are set up in advance for essentially all you need to find trades. And those of you who are familiar with the software will remember that there is a ton of these. There used to be over 25 different workspaces. And now we're down to there being only 10. These here. Okay, there's 10. There's 6 for different styles of futures trading and 4 for different styles of stock trading. And they each come in the variant with black background and white background, which a lot of people have asked for white backgrounds. I prefer black backgrounds, but for now, we have them in a white version as well, these 10 different ones. And the different styles you will see are there's for futures day trading, 5, 10, 15, and 20-minute zones are being scanned for, are being searched for. There's swing trading, 15, 20, 30, and 60-minute zones are being scanned for. There's what I call Excel swing, the very high time frame for futures, for swing trading of futures, which are 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 6 hour, and 8 hour zones are being scanned for. And then these 3 come in a variant that we call a high time frame overlay. Let me just show you that real briefly. I'll go to the futures swing high time frame overlay. If you're not familiar with them, this is one where instead of having 4 charts, you actually have 1 big chart. And all of the work takes place over here in the radar screen window. And then whatever you click at here, whatever row you click at here in the symbol column, that will be reflected as far as the symbol and the time frame in this big chart here. And then we have the high time frame charts over here, the 240-minute and the daily chart. And this is an example where you'll see already there's quite a few zones being highlighted. What's being highlighted here are the ones that are within proximity. That is, they are less than 2 hours away, because that is how we set it up. So if they're less than 2 hours away, they'll be highlighted in blue, and that's how that's always worked with the radar screen and with the SD zones indicator. And if I click on this here, it'll show that 20-minute chart. We'll see the 4,000 demand zone down here, and we'll see the 4,050 supply zone up there. Okay, we can control left click that, see what that looks like. And those are the zones there. In case of this, we find that this is just too many zones to look at. Well, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, when you get this software, if you don't trade all of the symbols here, the first thing I would advise is take some of them out. If you don't trade bonds, take out these. So that's 8 different rows right over there, 8 less things to look at. If there are some currencies you don't trade, we have a number of different currencies here: euro, pound, yen, the Aussie, the Canadian, and the Swiss. Let's say you don't trade these. Well, you can just remove those rows and save the workspace, and you don't have to look at those, and they're out of your way, and actually they will also consume a little less resources on TradeStation's part. But the next thing we can do is this: we can, like before, we can go in and say, listen, let's start going a little stricter. Let's go up to the extreme mode. Now, in extreme mode, it's actually finding significantly fewer zones than in the strict mode you saw before. So there's only just a few here. So let's just click on this. There's a 30-minute supply zone up here. And the main thing that is new with this, or that's not new because that's been there all along, but the main thing for those who are not familiar with the overlay workspace is that we have these zones from this high time frame chart, from the 4-hour chart, being overlaid here. So you see this, the magenta lines down here and the magenta lines up here is this here is that zone up there being overlaid there, right? And we'll see that we have the entry zone there, 32,734. That was the one that was highlighted here because it's only an hour away from current price, and it sits just below this rally based drop high time frame zone. So for a lot of people, particularly people who are new to supply and demand trading, this is actually a very handy and convenient way of getting into it, because you see an easy visual representation of where is the entry zone in relation to the high time frame zone. Personally, I prefer the one where we have 4 different entry zones, entry charts shown at different intervals, because that allows me at a glance to see if there's an entry zone I'm interested in. But just for, reviewing whether I like this setup, in this case, that if we come up here, we know that price already left a high time frame zone. That means, and as we're looking for a situation where there's plenty of room down to an opposing high time frame zone. The opposing one is all the way down here, although there may be something there that wasn't picked up by the indicator. But still, most of the time, it'll catch. You still have to use your eyes, but most of the time, it will catch when there's plenty of room. And in this case, there is plenty of room. So if we got back up to this 20-minute zone, that might be a potential trade. Since we broke this low here, if we can break this as well, that might help. But then we're getting into this. But I'm just showing the principle of how this works. Now, the main thing is, since we're now in extreme mode, as we'll see up here, that means we'll see way fewer listed over here. We'll see this 30-minute zone here. There's this 20-minute zone in the Russell, which is the old friend we had from before. There's a couple of supply zones in oil. Both of them sit above current price, 71, 76 that's on the 15-minute. We have to scroll down a little bit to see that one. There it is. And that's over there. That is indeed a nice zone. It sits smack inside a high time frame zone. So this is actually one that I might consider for a genuine counter trade for that reason. So when price comes up there, there's a high time frame zone, a fairly wide one, and it's reasonable to expect that price might make a turn somewhere up there. And if it is going to do that, this little pocket of supply is not a bad guess at where that, or not a bad prediction of where that might be. Question is then, where do you have to have your stop? And often I like to have my stop outside the high time frame zone. That's a little wide in this case. So that's something to think about if you consider this trade. But again, I'm just talking about how the software works. And in this case, it found that 15-minute zone. We can look at the 20-minute. That may be actually this. Oh, it is the same one, 76, 77. So you see it's just the same. Just found that looks a little bit different there. All right, a little bit different on the 20-minute. So here we're looking at these. These are all on the using the extreme mode. And what we can do is there's still plenty of setups actually. So there's quite a bit of action going on today, even in extreme mode. So when that is the case, there's no reason for you to look at more than these. You can start out with these in the extreme mode. And if you already have your trade setups for the day, you're good to go. But there are times when you don't necessarily find enough there. And then when you go to extreme mode, there's hardly anything to look at. Well, that's where you want to be in strict mode. And strict mode is now the default in all of these SD Radar, well, almost all of these workspaces, okay? Because strict is a good starting place where if you don't, if you just load the workspace and want to get started working, well, you're already in strict mode and it's already finding pretty decent zones. But if you want to filter them down further, if you want to narrow them down further, you can just, start by going to extreme. It doesn't take more than 2 mouse clicks and you're in extreme mode. You can use that so you don't have to waste your time or spend your time looking at more of these. If none of these are to your liking, you can drop one further down and go to the strict mode and then see if there's something there. And if it really comes down to it, you could go all the way down to medium mode. But now we're getting into zones that are a little more kind of dubious inquiry, and there's a lot of them right here. So this is something you would do when there really are no setups and you absolutely desperately want to find a setup to trade, which is not a situation you generally want to be in as a trader. All right, that was that. Let me just go over my list, see what's next I want to show you. Okay, so next thing I want to elaborate a little bit more on how we can use this in the the settings panel you saw, and also another feature that is one that I've been wanting myself for ever since I started with the software 5 years ago. Let me close this workspace and open the regular future swing workspace, and we'll use the white one this time so I can show you what those look like now. Actually, let me just open it this way. And we'll use the SD Radar White Futures Swing. Again, they are all default to strict mode, these workspaces now, so there's way fewer of them. And then if you want to go something other than strict, so to medium or extreme, well, you just change it. So here's the white one, a little bright for my eyes, but a lot of people like this setup. And again, this will show This is exactly like the one we saw before, except this one now is white, of course. And also it has these 4 different charts, 15, 20, 30, and 60, so that you can see 4 different charts, 4 different time frames at a glance. But what is shown over here, other than again being in white, is the same as what we saw before, namely quite a few trades in the quite a few potential zones, and when we're in strict mode. So let's drop it down to extreme, or rise it up to extreme if you want. We'll be a little more picky. We'll reload it and apply this to both all charts and all radar screen rows. And one feature I didn't show you before is how, if you have more than one workspace open, you can choose. In this case, it will only apply it inside this workspace here. Or you can say you want to apply it in all open workspaces. If you click this one down here, well, any windows you have open, any number of monitors, it'll apply it across the board as long as they are the same input for a settings preset, right? So it won't change your high time frame charts, but anything you apply here will be reflected or will be applied to all of the ones that use the same settings preset. So in this case, since the settings preset is strict for this and this and this and this and all of these, that means they will all pick up any changes we make in this window here. But if we wanted to change something over on the high time frame charts over here, well, we could do that. I don't know what that would be in this case, but we could say, for instance, we don't want to show merge zones, and we don't want to use almost touch. But if we did that, that would apply to these 2 only, right? See how it no longer merges. Or we can just go back and say enough with that. We'll just reset to the default, and they'll go back to the default setting over here. So once again, let's change this to extreme. I never reloaded, so I never applied it. So let's just do that here. We're now in extreme mode, and we'll go over what we did before. Now, the way I look for trades with this, the way since the very first version 5 years ago I came up with this is this. I have a radar screen where it scans for all of these different zones. What it scans for is, are we getting close to a zone that may be a potentially tradable trade? So when this, is highlighted yellow, it means if I go here to the Russell, it means that on the 20-minute in Russell, there's a zone that is, in this case, an estimated 1 hour, 24, 5 minutes away. We could get there in an hour, 24, 5 minutes. And if we do, that may be a potentially tradable zone for a short trade. That's how I've always been using this. And then if I don't like that, I go down the list to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And when I'm done with them, maybe some new zones has shown up in the meantime. And I go over the list again. Okay, so it's round until I find the trades I want for the day. And that was always a very powerful thing. The one thing that got a little bit tricky was often, how do I keep track of which ones I've already looked at over here, and which ones are new ones, because this is real time. So if the price comes near a new zone or a new zone forms, it will immediately flash up in here. It will show up in here if a new zone forms, and if we come near it, it'll flash yellow. So that is a real-time thing. So how do I keep track of that? And that is one of the main features that in this new version that is now being addressed. So if I look at this 20-minute zone, and let's say this actually is a pretty nice one here, which is why it worked already so gloriously. And it's the same one up here. And up here, it's drawn a little bit differently. It's drawn at 91. Here's at 91.40, which is why here we went a little bit deeper into it, which is why the indicator already said, we already enough into it with 2 touches. Let's not deal with this anymore. But here, it's still in play. It hasn't invalidated it because the zone starts only at 91.40. So this one is still active. Let's say I'm saying, yeah, that's fine. I agree up here. This one already worked. If I didn't get into this trade, I don't want to get into it again. Well, I can just right-click it. So right-click is a new feature. You can right-click a line on a chart. It can say invalidate this zone, and this zone now goes away. It's now no longer considered valid. You'll see the dashed dot outside line. You'll also see how it goes away over here. It's removed completely. Not only is it no longer yellow, the zone is no longer there. The next supply zone is yours for the 20 minutes all the way up on 1947. Holy smokes, that's a long way up, right? So we're all the way. It may not even be in here, all the way up there. That's the next one it's seeing. Right? So there's no candidate there. The next one is 15 hours away as far as time goes. All right. So this feature where you can actually invalidate a zone is reflected also across all the different charts and all the different radar screen rows. Now, let's say you were to undo that and regret that. Well, you can right click and you say restore this zone. That will bring it back, and now you'll see it back here. You can make the same action over here. So this is what you normally do when you're looking for trades. You come to one, you come to this, say, do I want this? Yes or no. And as a matter of fact, another reason not to like it, other than it's already been touched, is that we are approaching a high time frame, decent high time frame zone over here, at least on the 4 hour. And if price starts going higher from here, this may not hold. So that's another reason to maybe say enough with this. We had a good run with this trade already. So if over here you decide you don't want that, well, you can just click here, say invalidate this zone, and it will go away, and you won't have to look at that again. You know that if it's something new, yellow turn shows up over here, it's something new, right? It's something to look at. We can go to oil, which has a 15-minute supply zone, the one we looked at before, and it's the one all the way back there, which is not a bad zone. I'm a little bit nervous about that market makers and other stop hunters might want to look for stops in this range up there. So as price comes up there, and that will be smack. If we were to short this, that would be smack against a strong uptrend here. There would be a severe counter trend trade. That's not necessarily a bad thing because we do have a high time frame area here. So this is a valid counter trend setup in that regard. But I'm a little bit skeptical maybe about it. Because once oil is finally starting to move higher, also moving higher on a daily chart. See how we came into daily demand here, moving higher. So I'm a little bit nervous about taking it, but it's very possible it might give us at least 3 to 1. So you could consider that if you want. Personally, I'm probably not going to do it. But if I don't want to trade this, well, I could say, okay, we just invalidate this zone. It's going to be marked as dashed out over here. Same thing on the 20-minute. You say you invalidate it. It's not going to be there. It's going to be invalidating both of these charts. Now, if I don't want to see invalidated zones on my charts, if I'm like they're not showing up over here, well, I can just go into the visual settings and say enough of the invalidated zones. I don't even see them, and they won't be there at all. Right? So that's how that works. And we can keep going down the list. And what is that? Gold in the 30-minute, 15, 20, 30. So gold has 2 zones there. It's the one at the supply zone at 56.2, the one here. Again, that's a fairly decent one looking zone. And so is this one up here. But look what happened. We just came into a not very kind of big demand zone, but there is a 4-hour demand zone we came into here. At price bounced from that one perfectly. So the question is, do we want to short this? It may be that it just wants to come up to this and then go lower, smash through this. But my rule set is that once we touch the high time frame demand zone, it wants to come up to the opposing high time frame supply zone. So I don't really want to take any supply zones or short any supply zones in that case, in that situation. So this would be another one I would say, let's just invalidate that one. That one gets off the list because now that we said don't show invalidated zones, that means it is not on the list. We can go to silver, same thing. Actually that one looks pretty neat. We have a 50-minute zone right there. Price is moving higher from on the high time frame chart from demand. Let's see if we have any supply near, and we don't. As a matter of fact, on this chart, there's just a kind of a blue sky all the way up to here. And not only that, when you have something of this kind of quality, that's pretty good quality for a high time frame zone. There's a good chance that price will be driven up there. It becomes a magnet because there's presumably a bunch of orders up there. So whoever was trading it up there wants to see price come up there. So this could actually be a reasonable trade to consider. If we come back into this to go for a long here, expecting price to continue all the way up to there, there will be plenty of profit margin there, that's for sure. So that's something you could consider. I'm not going to do anything with it right now, but that's something you consider. So I'll leave that one there. We got further down. There's something in the euro here. So my point is really, I'm not here to teach supply and demand trading, but basically to show you as you go through this list, you check them off. If you like them, well, you can leave them there. If you don't like them, you just invalidate them. They get off your charts. They get off your list over here. If the new ones show up, that's because they are new ones. You need to pay attention to them. And when you get to the bottom of the list, well, you can start over. You'll have to wind it down or narrow down your list to trade setups you really want to consider. This is a big difference, and for me, it is the biggest difference in how I use this. I've used these features for over a month now, and it's a huge difference in how I've been able to manage my trades in the morning when I look for trades or manage the different candidates I'm looking at. And this is actually something I really, really like a lot, how that feature works. Now, One thing that you may find is you may later say, listen, I know I invalidate some trades here, some zones here. And by the way, when you save, if you save this workspace, all of that information will still be there. When you load it again, they will still be invalidated. When I come back to was it the Russell I came back to before where I invalidated something? Well, that's still gone. So how do we find it? If it's gone from there? Well, first of all, you could go and say, show me invalidated zones, and that will show you they're there. But you could also, in that case, let me just turn it off again. You could also just go and say, listen, over here, let's just restore all Russell zones, all the RTY zones. Let's just restore them all, and boom, they will come back as well. Not the ones that are already invalidated. The one up here was invalidated on this chart, but the one down here is still in place, so that one will still be there, right? If I, again, show invalidated zones, they'll all show up this way. All right. I don't know if that makes sense. It made sense. I hope it did. Let's see if I have something else on my list I want to cover. Okay, yes, a few more things I did want to show you. So just like I showed you, you can open this zone menu, as I call it, by right-clicking a zone line on a chart. If you right-click over here, you can invalidate a zone, assuming it is not already invalidated, and you can restore it, assuming it's not already, hasn't been invalidated. So if I go to this one down here, I can invalidate this zone. And as you know, that will be propagated to all of the other charts and all the other radar screen rows. If I right-click it again, I can restore it, or I can restore all 20-minute zones if I invalidate more than one. Or I can restore all Russell zones, or I can restore all zones in all symbols. So I can do that. So if I get in a situation where I work through this list and I'm a little in doubt, gee, what did I actually invalidate where? And I would like to see them all again. Well, you can just go here. You can say restore all zones and all symbols, and that will just take them all away, and then we'll put them all back on, and they'll all be there again. Now, just as you can open that zone menu by right-clicking a line on a chart, you can also open it by clicking any of these demand or supply columns over here. If you click on these, if you click on the demand in a demand cell, well, that's a demand zone you'll invalidate. If you click on the supply cell, it's a supply zone you'll invalidate. You see how that works, okay? And when you click it again, it'll say restore that 50-minute zone. That's the last one you invalidated there. And if you go over here, well, that's restore that one. Or what you can do is you can again restore all zones and all symbols, and that will take everything across all of these different rows, all of these different charts, and restore all of these, so you can find them again if you want to take another look at them. And just like with the I showed you before in the settings panel in here, that it'll apply this to all charts, radar screen rows, and by default it'll be only within the workspace that you selected. In this case, I showed you before, I'd actually clicked this, but the default is it'll only apply inside the workspace that you're working in, so that if you have other windows or other monitors or other workspaces open, any changes you make will only be applied inside that. And that will also be reflected in the little checkboxes you see here: apply to all charts, apply to all, in this case, YM radar screen rows, and only in this workspace. But also, you can open the settings panel for the radar screen row over here. So each of these rows is actually a little hidden chart in itself. That's how TradeStation radar screen works. So here we have 4 charts, and then we have these other 85 charts over here. Well, some of them are label lines, label rows, but the rest of them are all the little hidden charts in themselves. And for each of them, we can open the settings panel, and it'll actually be, just for that single one we're opening here. Now, we don't use that as much in in radar screen. Why? Well, because in radar screen, you could always go here and say studies and edit, and you could always make changes that apply to all of these different rows in here. Or you could select some, like for instance, let me show you this. If we go from ES down to including Russell, so these are just the index equity index futures. TradeStation will let me open that and say edit customize SD zones just for them. If I do that, I'll see that for just those I had already selected through my inputs to ignore zones formed between 4:15 and 3 in the morning. That's when the Europeans and the London session starts getting going. I already set that as part of defaults over there. So that's kind of the baseline just for those rows. If I go a little deeper into the bonds and the commodities, we can select these. You'll see that for these, it's a little different. I actually stop already at 3 o'clock because that's where many of these sessions, the pit sessions, normally close. Some of them even earlier. But until midnight, because once the Asian session gets going, we start seeing some institutional traffic again in these. So I already selected some settings for these in radar screen using inputs in the SD radar workspaces, and those can be set using features in radar screen to select different rows and select different inputs there. So normally it is not as relevant to go and use the settings panel in here, but you can if you want. If you click settings, that will open the settings panel for this. And sometimes you have to click it twice to open it. It is there, it's just hidden. When you open it again, it'll show if that ever happens. So that's how to handle that. And you'll see that for this particular, for the Russell 20-minute that I clicked, well, this is the settings panel for that one. But mostly any changes I apply will be applied to all charts, all radar screen rows, and either in all open workspaces or just in this workspace I'm in right here. One thing you may sometimes want to change in here is, how close do you want that proximity to be before we alert? So if we were to say, listen, I really don't want to see zones that are 30 minutes away, well, that would be how to do this, right? And that will apply to all of these. And suddenly we see, well, guess what? With this extreme setting we have right now, they're none. Okay, all right. That's something you could change in here with that. I can go back and say, listen, okay, let me widen that scope a little bit. What if I say I want something that's within the next 4 hours? I'm interested in that. Well, if I do that and click here, well, it'll find quite a bit more, including some that weren't there before, because the default I set with the inputs was just to look for anything that's 2 hours away. If we want to get back to that default, that's in the input values. I just click input down here. That'll set it back to that. Or I could just click reset all input values to all input values. I could do that, but that would then also reset the preset, which I don't want. So in this case, that will leave us at extreme, but go back to just highlight what is within 2 hours away. So that's how that works. I think that was the gist of it. The last thing I do want to talk about is the SD radar, the list of SD radar files, and I also want to show you the new stocks workspaces because they have been revamped somewhat. Let me close this first, this workspace here. We close this workspace. And again, if you save it, well, whatever changes you made will be saved with it. I would say normally open these workspaces when you first download them, adapt them so they fit your monitors. I only include ones for full HD screens now, so they're all designed to fit a 1920 by 1080 monitor using scaling 100% in Windows. If you have a different size monitor, well, adapt it to that, then save it. If you do want to make any changes from there on, just use it, make it using these the settings panel. Control right click in a chart, or go radar screen row and click settings, and you get the settings panel, and you can use that to change any other settings you need to change, and it doesn't only takes a couple of mouse clicks. And that's really the key, the essence of this whole release here. All right, so let me close that workspace. And we'll open the workspaces again. And you will see here I put all of them in one list, but I can go into the folder list. If I go there on my TradeStation 95. So when you download the new SD radar workspaces like this, there will be in 4 different or 3 different folders. There'll be the usual SD radar demo. The purpose of that one is just to see that the indicator installed properly and is working. And it looks like this. It only comes in black because it's just a test. It has a couple of different stock and future symbols in the radar screen over here, and it uses the overlay, so we're testing that feature is there. So again, the purpose is just to show and see that everything is working correctly. So that one is still there. And other than that, we have all of the black background ones under black background, and we'll see that they're all set to. There's not a medium and a strict and an extreme version of them. They're all in the mostly strict, except when you go to daily and weekly. Those are set to medium by default. But other than that, they're all set to strict by default. And I would recommend, because the naming is completely new for these, and a lot of these have disappeared, I would say, please delete all the ones you already have from me in the past, and then just download the new ones so you don't get them mixed up, because it's going to be such a mess if you get them mixed up together. So just download these new ones, get rid of the old ones, or put them in an old folder or something, and then just keep the new ones here. Again, all of these, it no longer says FHD, QHD. All of these are made for full HD monitors, and that's the assumption. And if you have a smaller or larger monitor, you can fit them to your size. I'm not going to keep trying to do that, except this. I use a quad HD monitor myself, so you will find there are a couple there, and there's also the scalping workspace. There's a couple of extra workspaces I'm going to throw in there that are there just because I don't like taking that feature away, and because I use them myself. So you will find a couple in there, but these are completely the same as the other ones, just adapted for a slightly higher model, for a higher resolution monitor. That's really how that is. Let me show you the stocks workspaces now, because rather than being named stocks 10-minute, it was called before, and 60-minute. So really what it is I'm calling them day trading and swing trading, the same as the futures workspaces. And if I open the day trading workspace in stocks, we'll find two things that are, or some things that are changed significantly in the stocks workspaces. So before, there was a kind of not handpicked, but a list of stocks here that was based on a scan that I would run. And then I would have to keep that list updated, as some of these stocks went out of business, and some of them came back in, and some of them changed their volume, so the scan changed. So instead of doing that, I just said enough with that. I'll just include the S&P 500 list in here. If you want a different list of stocks, you definitely should make one. You can make a scan that narrows this down if you want fewer ones, or you can delete some of these if you want, because that's a good long list, and not all of these may be to your liking. So for instance, a lot of people say something like, consumer cyclicals, we don't want to, which is consumer staples, non-cyclical. We don't want to trade that, but there's not enough action going on in those. Actually, there can be a little bit nowadays, but traditionally those don't have quite as much action. So you can remove those from the list if you want it. Or utilities. A lot of people don't like to trade utilities, and they want to invest in utilities, but they don't want to trade utilities. So you can take those out. Or again, you can use a TradeStation scan and just make a list of stocks you like. And if it's a little more less than 500, you'll actually be well off, because 500 here is a little bit on the high side of what TradeStation can handle, particularly considering there's also the ETF list that has another 80, well, actually 90 different ETFs. Well, probably 80 with the labor rows there. So that's quite a few rows, and that means one thing you will want to be aware of is when you load these workspaces, make sure they are fully loaded before you start messing around in TradeStation. The one thing that can crash TradeStation or make it unstable is if you start clicking around and doing things while it is still busy downloading things. TradeStation hates that, and that is one of the things that doesn't make it or that makes it unstable. Let me open the swing workspace, because that is the one that many people will want to use when they're trading stocks. And I'll show you something in here. So we're still in the stocks swing, and we're still using the white background. So this one, I've actually included now an interval column. Again, this is like all of the other stocks workspaces. It is all 500 S&P stocks that are in this here, and plus the ETFs, so almost 600 symbols in here. And what you will find normally is, if you go to the view messages download scheduler, is that the first time you load this, there will be a long list here while TradeStation is downloading all that. It needs to download over 1 gig of minute data. So it compiles these, it puts these together, TradeStation. This is not just for me, this is TradeStation itself. When you are building 500 or almost 600 different radar screen rows of 60-minute charts, it takes a number of 1-minute bars and combines them into 60-minute bars to build all of these. And for SD zones here, default is it wants 500 bars because otherwise it can't look far enough. So the essence is TradeStation needs to download a lot of minute data to populate this workspace here. And the first time, you need to give it time to do that. Start clicking around before that, you will get in trouble. It's not the indicator itself. SD zones is very, very fast, and I can show you how fast it is. If we scroll down the bottom here, and if I go here, like you saw before, and say, listen, let's change to extreme here, and you'll notice how quickly it recalculates over here. It doesn't take very long. Boom, it's done. That's how quickly SD zones recalculates all of these 600 different rows. So that is actually very fast, but TradeStation needs time to download all this data the first time in particular, and that's where you have to be a little bit careful, and that's what can be a little bit slow and a little bit laggy sometimes when that is there. Now, the new thing in this swing workspace for stocks is that rather being fixed to 60 minutes, what we have is this. We have a 50-minute chart here, which is really used to look inside any zones you find. Fine. Let's go back to the default values here, the strict. And let's say we go down to Dow, which is the first one that has any highlighted zones. And there will be a 60-minute chart. So this chart over here reflects whatever interval you're looking at over here. So see how it is green for the symbol linking, and it is yellow for the interval linking. So what will happen is anything you click on here, it'll be that symbol and that interval shown over here, then a 50-minute shown over here. And you can use that. You can go through that. And if you want to scan another interval, like in the futures workspaces, because there's not as many, there's only like 24 different futures, actually less. There's 20 different futures symbols there, and so we can afford to have 5, 10, 15, and 20 in there, and it won't really kill TradeStation. If we took all these 600 here and included, say, 15, 20, 30, and 60-minute rows, that would be so many rows. First of all, TradeStation wouldn't even accept it. It would say that's too many, I can't do it, and it would also become unstable at that point. So we don't want to do that. So we only include, in this case, the 600 only in quotation marks, and right now it's set to 60 minutes. If you want to say I want to scan 30 minutes instead, well, you can do that easily. Just go to time frame, you go under customize, and you set it for all symbols, not just for that one. And you say, listen, let's see if there's some 30-minute zones. You can do that. You change it to 30 minutes, and now we'll scan for 30-minute zones. And fortunately, that will go a little bit faster. TradeStation sometimes will give you, this is TradeStation 10 only, will give you an error when it's trying to look for options data. This is for the IV indicator. This is something that's documented for years, and it's been reported to TradeStation for years. And there's really nothing I can do about it right now. But it's just when you use the options indicator we have on the daily chart down here, it likes to show for your charts, it likes to show implied volatility and implied volatility historically. And you can do that for all of your stocks, but if you do that for an index or for futures, it actually gives you that error there before then not showing it. In the old days, before that error came, it just wouldn't show it, which is fine for me. It doesn't show it. But now what it does is it gives you an error first, which is a little bit annoying. But as long as you show it for stocks, there's no problem. So getting back to what I talked about, we have here, now we're scanning on 30 minutes for all of these. Again, you notice that didn't take very long because TradeStation already had all of the minute data gathered. It just had to put these together, and the indicator only takes a few seconds to calculate all of these. And now we're looking for a 30-minute zones that are there. And if we click any of these, it'll show those 30-minute zones up here. Again, we'll show inside here. We'll see the 50-minute zone. I always like to look inside a zone to get an idea of if the structure is right. As always, the daily zone down here is then your high time frame chart for this. So in this case, for instance, being looking at Linde PLC, well, we're moving higher from high time frame demand up to high time frame supply, and there's still some room to go. Although we are in something that may be a little bit stalling a little bit, So looking to buy a demand zone, pull back to demand is the kind of trade we're looking for, without getting into any actual concrete qualification of this trade. That's how you want to look at it. Obviously, if you're trading it as options, you also have to look at IV, which is down here. And for stocks, you definitely want to look at correlation between the different sectors and different and the broad market. In this case, we'll see that this particular stock is overperforming the broad market S&P by 5% the last month. So this is a strong one. So which is why buying demand zones is generally not a bad idea. Just today it's kind of flat, it's going nowhere. Again, I don't want to go into a whole lesson about trading stocks. If you're trading with options, obviously you have to look at the IV. If you're trading the stocks or options, you have to look at this as well as the sector performance and the correlation between the stock itself and that sector and the broad market. One thing that is new in this new list here is I'm including not only the sector they are in, I'm using the sectors that TradeStation gives us here. So in this case, it's basic materials because that is and it also shows over here on the weekly chart here, basic materials in the industry of chemical manufacturing. Now, that is the information TradeStation gives us, which makes it easy for me to do. I wish they would give us the S&P sectors instead, which is just the materials sector, matching the XLB ETF. So if you go under ETF, you'll see the different sector ETF. Those are based on the S&P sectors. And here we have the XLB, which is the materials sector. Unfortunately, TradeStation chose to use the Reuters sectors instead, and that is what this is broken down as. But I'm showing where it does match up with an S&P sector and one of the spiders sectors. I'm showing that here as well. For some of them, it doesn't line up completely. So for those, let's see if we get down. For instance, services, there is no match for the services Reuters sector in S&P. It's just a different group of sectors. So I just call it multiple S&P sectors in that case. So that's how I work that out. But again, you can delete this list completely, add your own list. You can prune this list if you like. So again, that's how the stock list works now, and that's the same in the different stocks workspaces we have, which is day trading, which has this, it's the same as this, just 10-minute, and you can change the 10-minute to 5, 10, 15, 20, or as you like, or swing trading, the one we're looking at here. And then we have the good old daily workspace, which is scanning on daily charts in here for daily zones, and weekly, which is goes all the way up to the weekly. The one thing I will say is do not open more of these workspaces at the same time, particularly not the stock ones. Now that we have so many rows in radar screen, you are going to simply exhaust the memory in radar screen, and it will not be able to deal with it. So do close one of these. If you want to open another one, we can close this. We go and open the daily. Take a look at that. And on that one again, we are looking inside using a 60-minute. The entry chart we're looking at, the one that matches up with what we'll click over here, is the daily over here. Again, you'll see that with the yellow interval linking. We have the weekly down here as our high time frame. We have one higher, the monthly we're looking at over here as well. And that's actually exactly like it used to be in the previous version. So there's nothing new in that regard. All right, I think that pretty much sums it up. What's going on with the new version. And to be specific, this new version is, I can show you that. If I go here under visual settings, I can use this chart title, say show version. And you'll see that this is version 2.01.069. The last one you guys received was 1.99.025. So this was a jump. This is a jump into a major release of 2 instead of major release of 1. I have been at 199 forever. Now we finally have all of the main things I wanted in release 2. Of course, not all of the things I really want, because I have so many more features I'm working on. But last year, in November, December release, I included a new detection engine, which is in the software now. I'm not making full use of it yet, but it is in the engine. And now we have this whole user interface with a settings panel when you control right click in a chart, or when you click a zone to get a zone menu, and you go to settings, you also get that settings menu. And you have in the that settings panel, and we have in the zone menu itself where you can invalidate zones, restore zones, and you can do that both in charts and in radar screen. In radar, I forgot to say that in radar screen, you cannot use the right mouse click like when you do on charts. TradeStation does not allow me to do that. So you just have to use a left mouse button click, and that's what will bring up the zone menu when you do that in radar screen. So with that, that pretty much is it. There you have it, the new version 2.01 of SD zones for TradeStation. And if you don't have the software already, I think you all know how to reach me, but I think most of you do. The ones who are new to this, you can reach me at this email address. I'm going to take it away quickly because I don't want too many spammers finding this. But you can reach me at that email address. Just ask for it. I am still giving this away for free. Everybody who are signing up now will get at least 3 months. But my intention is at one point in the not too distant future to start making this a commercial product. So everybody who sign up now still get 3 months for free, but we are hopefully I can get it set up where I can start setting up subscription for it because it's a lot of time I'm now spending on this software, and I have a lot of people I'm supporting for it as well. So someday in the not too distant future, I hope to have a subscription model set up for this, and of course, as many of you as possible will still be interested in continuing once we get to that model. But for now, if you don't have the software, you can just send me an email on the address I just showed you, and I'll put you on my list, and you'll get the software with no charge for a guaranteed at least 3 months in that case. Thank you very much for listening. I know I always talk very long, so that was it for me. Have a happy day and have a good day, and don't burn your fingers when Fed comes out with their FOMC announcement in about 30 minutes from now.